Dylan Hart, a 40-year-old financial consultant, and his wife, Marissa, a 38-year-old high school teacher, had settled into a comfortable but predictable life. Their days were routine, their conversations often mundane. They had been married for over a decade, and though they still loved each other, the excitement of their early years had faded. Marissa, always looking for ways to reignite their spark, came up with an idea one evening: let's volunteer for Senator Graham Fielding's re-election campaign. Dylan, initially skeptical about the time commitment and disruption to their well-established routine, hesitated. They both had busy careers, and he wasn't sure if they had the energy or desire to jump into something so unpredictable. But Marissa was persuasive, promising that it would be a fun and spontaneous way to bring them closer. "Think about it, Dylan," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "We could be part of something bigger, make a real impact. We could have some fun along the way." Dylan, intrigued by the idea of breaking free from their ordinary life, reluctantly agreed. Little did he know that this one decision would set off a chain of events that would unravel everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and loyalty. As they started their new roles on the campaign, they attended rallies, fundraisers, and meetings. Senator Fielding was everything Marissa expected in a politician: charming, charismatic, and, to her, inspiring. He was always the center of attention, but his attention to Marissa went beyond the normal professional interactions. He often complimented her, made her laugh, and seemed to remember every small detail about her life. Dylan, watching from the sidelines, felt a growing unease. He could sense the way Fielding's eyes lingered on Marissa a little too long, how his touch when shaking hands seemed a little too intimate. Dylan tried to shake it off. After all, this was just a campaign. But a nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach told him there was more to the story. As the days passed, Dylan's discomfort grew, and a growing suspicion began to fester. Marissa, on the other hand, seemed more and more drawn to the senator. She talked about him constantly, recounting his jokes and the inspiring conversations they had. Dylan began to feel like an outsider in his own marriage, a stranger to the woman he thought he knew so well. The tension between them was palpable, but neither of them knew how to address it until things took a turn that would change everything. As Dylan and Marissa dove deeper into their roles on the campaign, the line between professional and personal began to blur. The senator's charisma wasn't just reserved for the crowds, it extended to his interactions with the volunteers, especially Marissa. It wasn't hard for Dylan to see the magnetic pull between them. Senator Fielding, with his easy smile and undivided attention, had a way of making Marissa feel special, seen, even important. At first, Dylan tried to brush it off. After all, politicians were known for their charm, weren't they? But something felt different. Fielding's compliments seemed too intimate, his gestures a little too affectionate. Dylan caught glimpses of them lingering together at campaign events, his hand on her shoulder, her laughter too genuine, too heartfelt. It was all in front of Dylan, yet he couldn't quite figure out what was happening. Was it just innocent admiration, or was something deeper brewing between his wife and the senator? Marissa, blissfully caught up in the campaign's excitement, didn't notice Dylan's discomfort. She was thriving in the political atmosphere, feeling like a part of something much bigger than herself. The late nights at the office, the thrill of seeing her efforts make an impact, it was intoxicating. And Senator Fielding, with his smooth words and encouraging nods, made her feel seen in a way Dylan hadn't for months. The more she worked with him, the more she found herself drawn to his charm and energy. Dylan began to distance himself emotionally, sensing that something was amiss but unsure of how to confront it. He tried to keep up with Marissa's growing enthusiasm, but the more she talked about Fielding, the more he resented the senator's presence in their lives. What had started as a way to reconnect had quickly turned into a wedge between them. Dylan's suspicions began to gnaw at him, and every time Fielding's name came up, he felt a sharp pang of jealousy and frustration. As the campaign's intensity grew, so did the emotional distance between them. What was supposed to be a shared adventure became a silent battleground. Dylan was losing the woman he loved to a man who didn't even know he was fighting for her. Dylan's discomfort with the situation only grew stronger as time went on. What started as subtle signs of lingering look here, a shared joke there, soon escalated into something undeniable. Marissa's admiration for Senator Fielding was no longer just innocent praise, it had taken on a dangerous intensity. She seemed to be spending more and more time with him, leaving Dylan at home, waiting for her to return after late nights at campaign headquarters. When she did come home, her mind was elsewhere. She talked endlessly about the senator, his latest campaign speech, his plans for the future. Dylan was no longer part of the conversation. Late one night, as Dylan sat alone in their quiet living room, he couldn't help but wonder if it had all been too good to be true. Was Marissa truly in love with him, or had she just been going through the motions, waiting for something or someone else to light her up again? The thought gnawed at him. He knew he had to find out the truth. Unable to shake the feeling that something was off, Dylan hired a private investigator to follow Marissa. The investigator's findings confirmed his worst fears: Marissa was having an affair with Senator Fielding. It was the final blow, the revelation that shattered everything. Dylan felt his stomach drop, his heart splintering as the truth hit him like a freight train. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had loved, was now intimately involved with another man, and not just any man, one with the power to destroy their lives in a single stroke. Dylan was crushed, betrayed in a way he never thought possible. His mind raced with thoughts of revenge, of how he could make them both pay for their deceit. But first, he had to confront her. He had to hear her admit it, to see if the woman he once knew could explain away the unexplainable. The confrontation was inevitable. Dylan, unable to hold his anger and heartbreak inside any longer, demanded answers from Marissa. Sitting across from her in their living room, the tension was palpable. Dylan's voice was cold, his words sharp as he asked, "Is it true? Are you really having an affair with Senator Fielding?" Marissa, her face pale, could barely look him in the eye. She hesitated, as if the weight of the truth was too much to bear. The silence stretched on, unbearable, before she finally nodded. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The words hit Dylan like a physical blow. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he had shared his life with, had betrayed him in the most unimaginable way. He felt sick to his stomach, his world crumbling in front of him. All the doubts, the suspicions, the unanswered questions, it all made sense now. But even though the truth was out in the open, it didn't make the pain any less. Dylan's mind spiraled. He wanted revenge. He wanted them to pay for what they had done to him. The anger coursing through him was like a fire, consuming everything in its path. He knew exactly what he had to do. He would expose their affair in the most public, humiliating way possible. Anger and betrayal fueled Dylan's every move. He wasn't just going to sit back and let Marissa and Senator Fielding get away with it. His mind raced as he concocted the perfect plan. He knew exactly how to expose them both, to make their affair public in a way that would ruin their reputations. Dylan used his insider knowledge from his financial consulting job to manipulate the campaign's resources, setting the stage for a scandalous reveal. It was during a high-profile fundraiser for Fielding's campaign that Dylan struck. The event was packed with donors, political bigwigs, and reporters eager to catch a glimpse of the senator. Dylan's plan was simple yet devastating. He would ensure that the affair was exposed in front of everyone, causing a media frenzy that no one could ignore. As Marissa and Senator Fielding shared a private conversation backstage, Dylan orchestrated the timing perfectly. A hidden camera caught them in an intimate moment, their affection for each other undeniable. The footage was released to the media, and within hours, the scandal was all over the news. Senator Fielding's career crumbled. The media frenzy was relentless. His supporters abandoned him, his reputation destroyed. As for Marissa, the social consequences were swift and unforgiving. Friends turned their backs on her, her professional life came to a screeching halt, and she became a pariah in their community. Dylan, standing on the sidelines, felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. He had made them pay, but as the chaos unfolded, he began to realize that revenge, no matter how sweet, could never heal the wounds left by betrayal. The fallout from the affair was swift and unforgiving. Senator Fielding's political career was over. The media circus surrounding the scandal was relentless, and no one spared him. Fielding had been a prominent figure in politics, admired by many, but the affair with Marissa shattered his public image beyond repair. He was forced to concede defeat in the election, a bitter end to a promising political career. As for Marissa, her life took a sharp turn downward. Her affair with Fielding, once hidden in the shadows, was now the subject of public scorn. Friends she had known for years stopped speaking to her, colleagues at the school turned their backs, and even family members distanced themselves. The weight of her actions was impossible to ignore. She had not only lost her marriage, but had also become a symbol of shame in the eyes of everyone who once trusted her. Dylan's revenge had been swift, but it left him with an emptiness he hadn't expected. The satisfaction of exposing Marissa and Fielding didn't fill the hole left by their betrayal. He had hurt them both, but it had come at a great personal cost. The rage that once burned so fiercely inside him began to fade, replaced by the painful realization that nothing could undo the damage that had been done. In the weeks following the scandal, Dylan couldn't escape the aftermath of his actions. What had begun as a carefully crafted plan for revenge had left him with more questions than answers. The media had moved on to other stories, but the damage remained. Marissa, once the love of his life, was now a ghost of the woman he once knew. The affair with Senator Fielding had destroyed not just her reputation, but everything they had built together. Their once warm home now felt cold and empty, a reminder of the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. Dylan spent most of his time alone. The anger he had once felt, the rage that had pushed him to expose Marissa's betrayal, had turned into a quiet, gnawing sadness. He found himself staring at old photographs of their happy moments, vacations, holidays, the simple joys they had once shared, and now it was all gone. He had won his revenge, but at what cost? The victory felt hollow, the victory over his wife's infidelity an empty triumph. Marissa, too, was struggling. The public shame she had endured had taken its toll. She had lost her job as a teacher, unable to face the stares of her colleagues and students. Her family had ostracized her, and even her closest friends had distanced themselves. She tried to rebuild her life, but the pieces no longer fit. The affair with Fielding, once a spark of excitement in a dull marriage, had left her with nothing but regret. In the quiet moments, Dylan found himself questioning everything. Had he made the right decision? Had exposing their affair truly been the solution, or had it just made everything worse? He had expected to feel better, to feel empowered, but instead, all he felt was the weight of a broken life. Dylan knew he couldn't undo the past. The damage was done. But as he began to process the fallout, he realized something important: revenge hadn't healed his wounds. Only time, reflection, and forgiveness could begin to mend what had been broken. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could choose how to move forward. Marissa, for her part, also faced a turning point. As she worked through the rubble of her life, she found herself wondering if she could ever regain Dylan's trust, or if it was too late for redemption. She knew that she had made mistakes, but she also understood that the affair was only a symptom of a deeper issue in their marriage, a relationship that had lost its spark long before Fielding entered the picture. Both of them were at crossroads, their futures uncertain. Could they find a way to rebuild their lives, separately or together? Or had the damage done been too severe for either of them to move on? Only time would tell. Months passed, and life began to return to a semblance of normalcy for both Dylan and Marissa. The initial shock of the scandal had faded, but the scars remained. Dylan, though still haunted by the pain of the betrayal, began to focus on rebuilding his own life. He spent more time at work, throwing himself into his job as a financial consultant. It wasn't the most fulfilling work, but it provided him with a distraction. He didn't know where to begin when it came to healing, so he focused on what he knew: numbers, spreadsheets, and calculations. But deep down, Dylan knew that throwing himself into his work wasn't a solution. He had to confront the emotional wreckage, face the anger and sadness that had built up over the months. He began seeing a therapist, someone to help him navigate his feelings of betrayal and the lasting impact of Marissa's affair. Slowly, he began to unpack the layers of resentment, anger, and heartbreak that had consumed him for so long. The healing process wasn't easy, but Dylan was starting to see a path forward. Meanwhile, Marissa was also doing her best to move forward. She had lost everything: her career, her reputation, and the trust of the people she loved. But she was determined to rebuild. She found a new job in a small non-profit organization, one where her past was less relevant, and she could focus on making a difference in her community. It wasn't the glamorous career she had once envisioned, but it was a fresh start, and she took it. Still, she couldn't escape the weight of the affair. The guilt ate away at her, reminding her every day of the pain she had caused Dylan. She tried to reach out to him, hoping for some kind of reconciliation, but Dylan remained distant. He couldn't forget what had happened, and every attempt at communication from her felt like another reminder of his heartbreak. Despite everything, both Dylan and Marissa realized that they couldn't keep running from their past. They would need to come to terms with what had happened together or apart. Time had passed and things had changed. Dylan had learned to let go of the anger that had once consumed him. He had started to rebuild his relationships with his friends and family, though the scars of his marriage to Marissa were still there. But he had learned something important throughout this journey: revenge, no matter how sweet, couldn't replace what was lost. The emotional cost of his actions had been high, and though he had exposed Marissa's betrayal, he was still left with the same emptiness. Marissa, too, had come to terms with her past. She had made mistakes, but she had also learned from them. She had spent the last few years building a new life, one that didn't revolve around a broken marriage. But as much as she had tried to move on, she knew that she would always carry the weight of her actions. She had hurt Dylan, and she could never fully undo that. In the end, both Dylan and Marissa found new paths in life. They remained separated, but there was no animosity between them. They had both made mistakes, but they had also grown from them. Their marriage, once filled with promise, had ended in betrayal, but it had also led them to self-discovery. They would never forget what they had been through, but they had learned to let go of the past and embrace the future. As the years passed, both Dylan and Marissa had found their separate ways to heal and rebuild. They no longer harbored the bitterness that had once defined their relationship. Dylan, now a successful consultant, had found peace in his career and his newfound ability to enjoy the simple pleasures in life: long walks in the park, weekend getaways with friends, and quiet evenings spent reading or cooking. His emotional scars from the past had faded, but the lessons remained. He had learned that holding on to anger would only prolong his suffering, and forgiveness, while difficult, was the key to moving forward. Marissa, too, had found her own form of redemption. While she had lost much, she had gained something equally valuable: self-respect. She had spent years working with the nonprofit, helping those less fortunate than herself, and in doing so, had rediscovered her sense of purpose. Her relationship with her family had started to heal as well, though it was a slow process. Not everyone could forgive her, and she understood that. But she knew she had done her best to make amends, not only for the pain she had caused Dylan, but for the mistakes she had made within herself. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Dylan received a letter from Marissa. It was simple, heartfelt, and sincere. She thanked him for the years they had spent together, acknowledged the pain they had caused each other, and apologized once again for her infidelity. But this time, there was something different in her words: a sense of closure. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, but rather offering her peace. Reading her letter, Dylan felt a wave of emotion. It wasn't the same anger or frustration that had filled him in the past, but a quiet understanding. He had spent so many years blaming her for their broken marriage, but now he saw that both of them had contributed to its downfall. They had both been flawed, and they had both learned, in their own ways, to heal from their mistakes. The pain would never disappear entirely, but it was no longer the driving force in his life. As he folded the letter and placed it on his desk, Dylan smiled softly to himself. The past, with all its anger, betrayal, and hurt, had finally lost its grip on him. He was free to live his life without the weight of revenge hanging over him. And he could only hope that Marissa, too, had found that same sense of freedom. Years later, as Dylan and Marissa lived their separate lives, they both moved forward in ways that were unimaginable when their world had once been torn apart. Dylan married someone new, someone who shared his values and helped him continue to grow emotionally. He had built a life rooted in trust, something that had once seemed unattainable. Marissa, for her part, never remarried. She dedicated herself fully to her work and helping others. She had come to terms with her past and, in doing so, found a new kind of peace. While she never forgot Dylan, she no longer felt haunted by what had happened. Life had moved on, and so had she. In the end, their story wasn't just about betrayal and heartbreak, it was about redemption and the quiet courage it took to rebuild from the wreckage. It was about forgiveness, not just of others, but of themselves. They had both learned that sometimes, the hardest part of moving forward is letting go of the past. Thanks for watching. If this story has touched you in any way, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more stories that explore love, betrayal, and the paths we take toward healing. See you in the next video.